joining us right now on the BetQL Guest Hotline. It is Dianna Russini, now a senior NFL insider for The Athletic.
Did you hear the walk-up?
I do hear it, yes. It's her theme music, apparently.
I love it.
And Dianna was tweeting yesterday about how much ownership had a hand in these trades. Let's get to it. Hey, Dianna.
Are you kidding? This is how I get I haven't been on the show in 15 years, and this is how I get a hello?
Dirty Dianna.
It's respectful.
Hey, that was no. She requested that walk-up song in 2014.
Oh, do you remember that?
Oh.
Of course, I remember that.
No,
I remember
I'm asking
everything.
her.
Oh.
I'm asking her.
Can you guys just erase any memory you have of me before 2023, and I will feel so much better about coming on the show? You guys have literally witnessed me grow from an absolutely clueless moron reporter into a clueless moron mother now.
There you go. It's progress,
Congratulations,
Dianna.
by the way.
Thank you. Yeah. By the way, the first time I ever was on your show, I was in college at George Mason. It was like 2003. And so here we are, I guess, 20, I can do math, 20 years later.
Amazing.
So
Amazing. Well, you know we're huge
Yeah,
fans.
you were on the show when Cakes had hair and I had dark hair.
Yeah, long time ago.
It's a different world.
Many decades ago.
Yeah, and I was just saying to Matt, you guys are cockroaches. You don't die. You're still doing this. So congratulations to you guys for. I was explaining to my husband who's from Philly and he doesn't know what he's heard of you guys but doesn't know. And I was explaining, you guys have been around forever, and it's just because you're so damn good at what you do.
Oh,
So,
you're
Yeah,
sweet.
tell them
I'm so happy to be back.
we're like Angelo Cataldi was in Philly.
That's right.
Except better. Hey, so get into this strong hand. You tweeted about the ownership having the strong hand in deciding these deals.
Yeah.
What have you heard? What is going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, don't freak out, right? Because you have to realize, I have to realize the audience I'm talking to in Washington, and they hear the word owner, and they immediately go back to the 2013, 14 drafts, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is an owner telling everybody and which coaches to draft who. That's not the type of power structure I'm sensing coming out of that building at all. If anything, this is a completely different style of management than what we saw in years past with Dan Snyder. So everyone just take like a big exhale because it is in the hands of somebody who has not just vision for right now, but long-term vision. And in terms of the alignment of everyone that is making these calls inside the building, especially obviously yesterday as they're fielding tons of calls over the last few weeks or so, the coaches, the front office people, ownership, were in line with understanding they need to make moves for the future. Of course, the coaches want to keep key players, and they want to keep players that are contributing, right? This isn't just special to Washington. This is everywhere, and every coaching staff that I've been having conversations with over the last few days. They don't want to give up their players. Of course they don't. They want to try to win, and we on the outside may say, guys, the season's over, right? Like you're probably not going to be able to make a run here. Maybe, but probably not. But that's not how they're constructing their team. That's not how they're preaching their message to the locker room. And the locker room is the most important aspect for the coaches. So it's really just a long way of basically saying this is about long-term vision. This is ownership going, it may sting. This is hard, but we got to pull this Band-Aid and let's get some draft capital.
Dianna, let me ask you this. And we threw this out earlier on the show as a topic. JP and I were kind of going back and forth on this. If they would have beaten the Eagles, and they're 4-4, okay, with a legitimate shot at a playoff, and they still have a legitimate shot at a playoff because the NFC sucks. But if they're 4-4 after beating the Eagles, the best team in the NFC, are they making these deals?
It's a good question. Now, look, they were fielding calls before that game.
I agree.
They were calling teams trying to get a sense. I talked to a few general managers last week who spoke to Washington about about both players. So this plan has been in place. So now, do I think both get dealt? Maybe not. Now, I can tell you the conversations I had, Washington really didn't want to deal both. The thought was one, not two. I was told two could happen. It wasn't like completely off the table, but I think the overall feeling, if everyone was betting on it in the building, it was, all right, we're going to deal one and keep the other. And then in the end, because they were able to get a good compensation for it, they made this move. Now, look, I've spoken to other teams over the weekend who won, and it did change the fabric of their team. So you're onto it in terms of having that question of would that have changed it. But I think ownership here is all in on trying to make changes for the future.
San Francisco got lit up by two really good quarterbacks the last 2 weeks. So I understand why there's concern, and their front four has not performed the way, pre-Chase Young had not performed the way they certainly did last year and how they expected. Do they think Chase Young, it kind of puts them over the top? I mean, did they not watch Chase Young here?
No, I don't think they believe he's going to put them over the top. They just look at it as in Washington, he's one of the main players on defense that teams have to be worried about. In San Francisco, he's not, right? He just mixes in with the rest of those stars on that line. So, from their perspective, they don't feel that they gave up a lot for a 9-game rental here for a team that we know is going to make a deep run. So they're celebrating this move, knowing that, that's a third-round compensatory pick, that they got from Rand Carthon and D'Amico Ryans in Houston. So for them, they think it's worth it. Now, look, I had a conversation with another GM who said, I don't really, just was giving his opinion about it. It was like a starter in the draft for 4 years or Chase Young for 9, not knowing about his injuries, which had a lot of question marks, where he's at. And my rebuttal to that was, well, look at the type of play he's had this year in terms of him individually. To me, he looks good. Why wouldn't San Francisco do this?
What do you make of like Ron's future, Jack's future? What are people whispering? Because it appears to me they're somewhat checked out. Like, I think they know their fate, that new owners like to hire their own guys, and then barring, a great turnaround, they're probably going to go. It just kind of seems like they're coaching that way. I know that you say they were in unison with the ownership, but you kind of have to be because the ownership owns the team. Like, what are you hearing in terms of their futures? Do you see an in-season change?
I don't see an in-season change. I don't. I think if there were to be one, and I don't know of any, I don't have anything like on the record or even sourced information right now that ownership is planning on moving on, from Rivera. But I'm with you in terms of new ownership likes to spend a lot of money and likes to bring in their own people, which is why I do think the Commanders will be active in free agency. I think they're going to make some moves, and I could see this happening. Now, look, I don't know what kind of conversations they're having in the building in terms of Ron's direction and what they've made of his coaching this past season. And you guys have been around it. You've heard a million reports. Ron is always one of those coaches that everybody really likes. But we both know when it comes down to it, he's got to win playoff games, and it just hasn't happened with him, being the head coach at this point.
What about Hal and all these conversations you're having with other coaches and GMs, et cetera? Has anybody paid attention to what he's done and like what their plan is with him?
Yeah. Similarly to the way Washington feels about him, which they think that he can play, that he could be part of their future. So I had a conversation this morning with a head coach outside the division, and his thought on the whole thing was Washington's going to roll with him. He can play. So at least the idea that they have a quarterback, if that's how they want to move forward, depending if Ron stays, if a new coach comes in. Obviously, there's still so many decisions that need to happen. It is only November 1st, right? I do feel like, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I feel like it's like late December right now. I don't know why, but it feels like so much has happened. But it's still pretty early. But overall, I don't see the Commanders making a significant change with their coaches during the season. No way.
Dianna, getting back to the trades for just a second, is it a coincidence that Washington announces the hiring of Eugene Shen, a well-respected analytics mind, on October 26th, and then 5 days later, 2 huge pieces are dealt away? Like, I have a hard time thinking that's a coincidence.
Yeah, quite the first few days for him, huh?
Right,
Comes in here,
right.
goes,
Very busy.
all right, based on my numbers, here's what you got to do. And look, we know ownership is, they're analytics based, right? This is where they lean in, and you're seeing this everywhere in football right now. Every team is operating this way. Look, I don't necessarily know of any information where he came in and said, all right, this is my suggestion, but you got to figure they asked him. It's not like he just started day one on the job and just went through the benefits package program and HR training. I'm sure he jumped right in here giving his thought if they announced it. So I'm interested to see how much of a hand he'll have in terms of the power and making these decisions come free agency.
So as far as the Sweat deal to Chicago, it doesn't make any sense for Chicago to give up possibly a top 35 pick for a rental because they're not making the playoffs. So I assume he's going to work out some sort of a deal with the Bears.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've been trying to find that out. And I know the Bears weren't the only team in on him. For one team in particular, they wouldn't give up a 2 and they wouldn't agree to an extension until they really got to see him play. But, they would have given up a third rounder with a condition for it for a second rounder. And that's the thing, like high second round picks are gold. Not every player drafted in the first round is what's considered just a first round grade. So the value of that, like a second round pick, is enormous to teams with, the contract cost and potential impact. So, I think for Chicago, the fact that they can have control, at least first dibs at Sweat, they could franchise tag him if they want. So for them, it seemed a little odd at first, but then we start actually digging in on it. It does make a lot of sense from the Chicago side of this as they're trying to build. Because remember, this is a team that gave away Roquan to Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
And, pass rushers are hard to find, at least in the free agent market, right? Because even, like, I go back to last year, like, who's the top pass rusher that hit free agency? Like, Von Miller? Like, you know what I mean? So this was smart for Chicago to just try to get dibs on him.
Talking to Dianna Russini, senior NFL insider for The Athletic. Just to go back to your speculation on Ron, I'm just curious, did you think that it was happening in Vegas for Josh McDaniels, the in-season firing?
I did. And then that's not me going, oh, guys, I know everything. I don't know anything. But I've had conversations with people around the league and people that are part of decision-making who had told me that ownership had already started to look around, to start feeling out what the game plan is. Now, I did speak to Mark Davis in person on the record at the owners meeting and asked him directly if he was going to fire Josh McDaniels this season. And he did tell me our focus is to just win right now, and we're going to make those decisions after season. So obviously things change, and they did. And while I don't think he wanted to tell me what they were doing, I think in his mind, even when we were chatting, that this was going to be part of the plan, because he's not happy with what's been happening there. And I think when the locker room starts that change, and guys, you've seen it in Washington for years, right? Like, how many times have we talked about, like, oh man, as soon as the players turn, it's done. Mm-hmm. That's when you start sensing that, and even if it's just body language, you know trouble is coming. And that's exactly what we saw. And then, a firing in the middle of the night, just like that on Halloween night, just pretty wild.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know you're talking about the Raiders, but I mean, that's the body language I'm seeing here in D.C. I think they are going to make a change. If they do, Dianna, do you know we keep hearing about, so I got two questions for you. We keep hearing about this Ben Johnson guy, the offensive coordinator in Detroit, is like the hot next, like, sort of head coaching guy. You hear Harbaugh's name. What are the names should we be thinking about? And also GM-wise, who are the hot next new GMs?
Yeah, Brian Johnson's another name in Philly, right? Remember, he was getting Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals, was up for that Arizona Cardinals head coaching job last year.
I want an offensive guy.
Yeah, I don't think there's any chance to go back-to-back defensive guys. But
I'm over that.
Yeah, you guys are funny. You're like, I don't want to hear one DC.
Nope.
No, depending, I was going to say depending on what Philly does, I don't think it really matters. I do think Brian Johnson's going to be another name we hear in this rotation. And you're right, Ben Johnson will be a name. We'll see if he's going to be willing to actually step out and take on some head coaching roles. Because remember last year he had an opportunity, but he chose to stay in Detroit. So we'll see if that comes back around. I mean, usually the way this works, it's not a very complicated formula. You start seeing the teams in December and January make these runs where the offenses look proficient, and then those guys get the opportunity. It's all timing.
Right.
So we'll see kind of who's going to be ahead come the playoffs and who the hot names are. But you see right now, with the exception of the quarterbacks that we know, like Patrick Mahomes, who you could argue, I mean, he's still playing at a high level, but he could use some weapons. But, does Matt Nagy get another shot, right? If the Kansas City Chiefs keep going, because remember, he's the offensive coordinator there now.
Right. What about GMs? What are the hot GMs? Are there any that you know, like personnel guys that people love or whatever?
There's no name right now. I know off the top of my head that guys that the owners are like, man, this is the type of dude we need. But usually that stems from, again, another winning team that put together a roster that kind of surprises you come the playoffs. So give this another month or so, and we'll I'm sure we're going to start hearing a lot of ones. Lot of names.
Real quick before we let you go, was there any name that wasn't dealt that you a bigger name that wasn't dealt that you expected to go?
I thought Denver was going to move more than they didn't do anything.
Right.
They were the team that was high. Yeah. And even just talking to them, they kept telling me this isn't a fire sale. We're not doing this, and I believe them. But I thought they would at least deal Jerry Jeudy, one of Cortland Sutton, one of those players on offense to just try to get some picks back, knowing that I'm not sure what they're going to do with the quarterback position. I know they're tied in contractually to Russ, but we'll see how that works out.
All right, Dianna, good stuff, and we will begin anew with you in 2023.
Got to get you on more frequently.
I would love to be on with you guys, but I got to tell you, just talking to you as I was chatting, I just kept thinking, God, we got old. What happened on us? I remember
Very true.
I was asking dating advice and all this stuff, and now it's just like now I'm like, guys, what do you do with a toddler when they don't understand Halloween? Like that's what's on my mind.
Hey,
today.
parenting advice. We got tons of that. We got so much of it.
We got it all.
Tell me all. Please share all your mistakes so I don't make them.
Oh, we got them all. We made all the mistakes.
Certainly.
Thank you, Dianna.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.